Welcome, everyone, to the latest in our series of SMI podcasts. And ship-to-shore connectivity is now really a must-have for crew recruitment and retention, with owners, managers, and operators facing new operational and security obligations as usage patterns and demands mirror home internet behavior. And it is not just limited to crew welfare, entertainment, training, but also software as a service, as well as regulatory and welfare requirements. CCTV, shared space monitoring, harassment prevention, they're all emerging as additional drivers for onboard connectivity and systems integration. But this is all against the backdrop of related headaches such as data costs, cyber risk, misuse, and scams, something that the industry has been inundated with on a daily basis. Well, we're delighted today to welcome to our podcast Robert Blackman, who is Senior Manager, Service Business Development at KVH Industries. Bit of a background about Robert. He was raised and educated in Southeast London. Robert has held numerous IT positions from operations to network admin, and by chance landed in the maritime comms world in 2010 with a small integrator called Livewire Connections in Surrey in the UK, who primarily worked with large super yachts. Robert then moved to the US in 2013 and set up an office for them in Lauderdale Marine Center in Florida to cater to the super yacht industry there. In 2016, he joined Intelligent Technologies as its America's tech support manager, managing help desk, field service, warranty, etc., and was involved in many new product launches, working closely with the product teams. And prior to joining KVH in May of 2024, he spent some short periods with the Maritime Cloud SD-WAN vendor and another large maritime stabilized antenna manufacturer. But at KVH, he's responsible for its CommBox Edge ecosystem, KVH's own SD-WAN, captive portal and firewall solution, but it also has many other features, hence the ecosystem nomenclature as well. But we'll find out more about. Robert, welcome to the podcast. Have I done you service with your bio there?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that, and happy to be here with you.
Well, lovely to speak to you today. Look, should we start really by getting you just to explain a little bit more about the CommBox Edge ecosystem, but also about the paywall facility as well, because I think that's quite important. What does it all mean? Tell us a little bit about it. Tell it for the listeners.
Yeah, as many customers probably know, CommBox Edge or CommBox has been around in the KVH world for quite some time. It was just a communications gateway previously, but with CommBox Edge, which was launched in early 2024, it really brought a host of new features to that system. Hence, we sort of, even though CommBox is in the name, we say it's more of an ecosystem because there's a lot of features there and it uses a lot of cloud-centric technology. So really what we've seen is, with customers' communications needs getting more complex, more diverse with the dawn of LEO satellite communication and other sort of vendors coming into the space, vessels now have, a myriad of connectivity. And one of the, I guess, major problems was how to control that connectivity and ensure it's used in its best possible way and the customer's getting the best value for money. So CommBox, as I say, started off as a connectivity solution, a router with multi-WAN technology. But as it's grown, we've added more features for crew welfare, such as our captive portal for managing like an internet cafe or a hotspot. And then in addition to that, most recently was our paywall. So enabling our customers to control their costs more and potentially, offset those costs with the paywall. So instead of previously where they said a crew member had a allowance of data, and then once that data was consumed, it was sort of tough luck till the following month. Now, the customer or the crew member can choose to purchase more data and continue with their connectivity. So it gives more flexibility to our customers and the crew members.
Well, I want to sort of touch a little bit on that and how we sort of manage all of that side of it, because I think that's really, really important, not only from a user, a ship owner, manager, operator perspective, but also from the seafarer perspective. You mentioned there about some of the facilities in there, certainly with things like welfare and what have you. What is the market demanding as far as facilities are concerned? Because as you've alluded to there, innovation in the industry is moving at such a pace now, and there are so many issues, that owners and managers and the users and the seafarers are wanting. But what are they asking for? What sort of facilities are you adding in, and what will you be adding in additionally? In the months and years ahead.
Yeah, I think the key thing now with the welfare aspect is, here in the US, we're even seeing crew unions demand a level of connectivity. So previously, we never really had that drive. The drive was more food related, or, they wanted to have movies or crew TV. Now, internet's becoming a more of a necessity and a demand from the crew members. And we're in a unique situation in maritime because, all of us in the corporate world, if we use internet at work, it's normally for our sole work purpose. Maybe you check your internet banking on your lunch period or something like that. But there's not a lot of, downtime internet or leisure time internet, which is more prevalent on the vessels. So the vessels are using, a huge amount of data like you would at home for streaming, for social media, keeping in touch with loved ones. I don't think I know of a single vessel that doesn't have Telegram or WhatsApp in every crew member's pocket. And now with smart devices, everybody has a computer in their hand essentially, and they expect that connectivity. They expect that the connectivity is as good as or as near as good as shore-based connectivity now. So I think that's been a huge driver. We've seen ship owners and operators sort of demand better internet for crew, demand more stability, and business operations obviously still critically important. But we are seeing, 2, 3, 4 times the amount of data being spent on crew welfare. So as I say, now it's become a necessity really, and for ship owners and operators to retain crew members, that benefit goes a long way to do that.
Now, with a nod back to the CommBox Edge system, when you and I are going around our daily business, we're out with family, we're at work, whatever, pick up our phone, we just use the internet. We don't think about anything. I think the only time we think about it is when we go abroad on holiday. Am I going to be charged extra for this? But then there's all these sort of programs that you can sign in for and budget programs and stuff like that. Is it becoming like that on board ship now where everybody is just expecting the best service and to be able to use it nonstop all the time?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there are still some limitations, but with hybrid connectivity, those limitations are disappearing. So now, as you say, when we're out in our everyday life and we, go to a coffee shop or we're on a bus or a train, we have that connectivity and we don't even think about the handoff or the roaming that our devices are doing. And essentially, that's the same technology CommBox Edge allows a vessel to do. So as a vessel is moving, from shore-based connectivity, maybe they're using LEO satellite and cellular. And then as that vessel departs, the cellular signal gets weak and drops. Then our CommBox is managing that connectivity and switching based off the available connection. So essentially that vessel is roaming across the globe. And we find that the customer doesn't necessarily care what the connectivity is as long as it's good, right? So they don't care whether it's geostationary satellite, if it's LEO satellite or cellular, but it must be good. It must be continuous and consistent. So that's one thing with CommBox Edge we can do very well with failover and recovery and switching those connections almost seamlessly, so the customer doesn't realize. And those end users, predominantly crew members, the same thing, they don't really realize the complexity behind it and what's happening, all the switching that's going on, but they will jump up and down as soon as they can't send a WhatsApp message or if something is not connecting through to the internet. So yeah, we've got to make sure that we have reliable connectivity, and CommBox Edge enables us to do that. And, we've all been there in our personal life where, you've been somewhere without signal and you can't send that email or that text message. And it's getting less and less prevalent nowadays, but that's still a challenge in the maritime environment. But CommBox Edge helps solve that with hybrid connectivity.
But also the one thing that you have to balance, as you rightly say, on board ship, and it's very unique because we don't have that same situation between work and home, is balancing recreational use as well as the needs for the ship. How does that work in that respect? How does the system deal with that? Because there have to be priorities, don't there?
Yeah, so we can prioritize with quality of service, or QoS as it's known in the comms world. Obviously, business traffic will always have the highest priority for ship owner operators, and we ensure that on business networks. We have separation between business networks and crew networks. Obviously, this kind of data the crew are using is very different, and it comes with its own set of risks. You imagine the amount of malware, phishing scams, spurious websites we see nowadays spoofing some big company we all know. It's very risky. So it's a fine balance for the ship owner operator to enable the crew to have that connectivity and that perk, but also protect their systems. So separating the crew network is a must. We do that all the time, and we ensure that there's no way that the crew network can infiltrate business network. Business network obviously always has priority, so operations can work even if streaming doesn't or something like that. And we manage that through CommBox Edge with a number of things, with firewalling, with content filtering, so we can filter different categories and stuff that may be higher risk than others, and what we call deep packet inspection, where we can actually, essentially steer traffic that may be less important to a backup connection or a lower priority connection, or we can route traffic depending on its destination or its application type, and we can use all the connectivity available to the ship. So you don't get that issue with bandwidth starvation, where you can get that when you're using just a single connection at a time. So the beauty of CommBox Edge is the customer can use all the connectivity that they're paying for, and choose how they route their traffic.
How does it sort of work out when you're actually trying to educate the seafarers as well, Robert? Because you know, there was always this issue, wasn't there? When you look at different nationalities of seafarers, they do different things. So, the Filipinos would normally in their rest period would go in and just spend all time texting home and what have you, when they should be getting rest. They should be getting some, fatigue is a big issue on board ship. That leads then into welfare issues and anxiety and what have you. But also managing their usage, because if they've used a lot of bandwidth up and then suddenly they have to start paying for it, and then they're, eking into their salaries. How is all of that managed? Because that must be a challenge when you've got a lot of internet and connectivity speed now between ship and shore, but managing that usage, how much of a challenge is it, and how is it sort of dealt with?
Yeah, it's a good point. If you don't have any checks or barriers, then you're just going to consume a ton of data and rack up a high data bill. Way most customers are managing that today, from our experience, is using captive portal. So, each crew member has an individualized login, which is secure and unique to them. With that login, you can manage the plan and the data allocation. You can manage, the number of devices a crew member can use, the hours of operation for certain traffic or categories. You can have it so maybe there's just a plan just allows the crew members to communicate and text and do Wi-Fi calling, but doesn't allow them to do social media streaming at a certain time of day. So there's a lot of ability to control that kind of data. But part of it really is education as well. So we've had customers, especially with high speed internet that's available now on vessels, where a crew member has taken a game console on board the vessel and racked up a huge amount of data. So there's education there with the owner operator, with the crew members, of what can be done, what can't be done, the limitations there. So we work with our customers to essentially create a plan that works for them, create the rules that works for their business and their crew members, and educate them and their crew members to what's available to them. We have other services available from KVH, which for entertainment, email, other welfare, crew welfare packages, where they don't need to rely on using so much data as well. So we can work with our customers to come up with a plan that fits them.
That, I guess, is using available bandwidth to maybe download films or stuff onto iPads or stuff like that the seafarers can access offline, I guess.
Yeah, well, we have a KVH Link, which is our media arm of the business. So, we can provide set-top boxes, which can aggregate content, so you're downloading it once and sharing it across the crew cabins, and it's available for crew to access without re-downloading, without streaming. If you have every single crew member streaming on multiple devices, then the data usage can get out of control. So using something like a KVH Link media service enables, the ship owner operator to still offer services such as movies and TV and entertainment to the crew members, but controlling it without everybody streaming uniquely and re-downloading content.
Now, you said earlier about some of the seafarer unions, demanding Starlink and wanting the best, etc., or wanting options there on board ship. But when you're speaking to the industry right the way across the board, what are they asking from you now, as well as what they're asking for you to maybe prepare for the future? Because, and we'll come on to AI-based applications in a minute, but that is just going at an amazing rate as well. What are the owners, managers, as well as the seafarers demanding at the moment, as far as all of this is concerned?
Yeah, I think the increase in data speeds has opened up a huge amount of opportunities for ship owner operators, to deploy new technology, like you say, to bring vessels into the 21st century, shall we say. Often the vessels were almost, their own little island, if you like. They were cut off from the other business operations. There was still a lot of manual upload and download of data when ships got to port and stuff like that, or they had better connectivity. But now that increase in speeds and reliability enables the ship to be more connected, maybe connected to the HQ constantly 24 by 7. So people are getting real time course chart plotting and information about the cargo and the port calls and etc. So I think that's really enabled ship owner operators to know more about what's going on with their business, work out where they can be more efficient. And then with the crew side, ship owners understand that, crew retention and having happy crew is a must, so you can avoid recrewing costs. So I think more on board with that now, whereas before I feel that the communication for the crew was secondary. It's becoming more important to the ship operator as well. And as you say, with AI, there's so much AI in the world now with different programs. But what I've seen in the shipping world is, some interesting AI projects, such as temperature, thermal monitoring for, perishable cargo, man overboard systems, smart CCTV systems, which are object tracking or object identification, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's interesting and it's enabling a lot more technology to get on board.
The good thing about shipping it's always been regarded as being a very agile industry. Is it adopting innovation and technology like this at the right pace? Is it because it's been accused of being a little bit behind other sectors like aviation and what have you? But are you seeing really accelerated take up, or are you seeing certain elements of the market still not really understanding really what's available for them? Really, I suppose, because you've got different ship owners and different managers out there that have either embraced digitalization or haven't. But how are you seeing that sort of take up of all of this? Because as you say, AI is very exciting, but it's quite complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, it comes with its own risks as well. If you think of any new piece of technology or software that you put on a vessel is potentially accessing the internet, accessing a public domain or space, if data is getting out, then there's a way for somebody to get in. So there is risk associated there. But I think, going back to your point, I think the dawn of LEO connectivity has really accelerated new technology going on board. So you're right. I mean, I cut my teeth on corporate IT on land. And when I came to maritime, I was shocked how far behind maritime was to land. But now I think, there's a real acceleration for adopting new technology, and just the connectivity is what does that, what allows that, right? So, when we had ships 10 years ago, you were lucky if you had 1 meg by 512 on your speed. So now with Starlink and Amazon Kuiper coming to the field and OneWeb, you've got like home speeds or like business speeds. So the vessels are becoming like a branch office. They're connected. They're not seen as something that is so unique and specialized now, and like I say, isolated like it was before.
There's no doubt there's massive amount of opportunities ahead, and I'd like to get your views on where you see new areas of the market potentially opening up, for with all of this, because as we move forward, what's going to happen in a year's time, 2 years' time is going to be vastly different to what's happening now. But also there are challenges as well, aren't there? Because it's, shipping very fragmented as an industry, different geographical routes, different trade routes, different types of vessels and what have you. Can you sort of put that into a little bit more of a context for opportunities versus challenges with all of this? I'm a very optimistic person. I see this as being one massive glass half full scenario, but will always be challenges in there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The vessels and what they're doing is so different, but the common theme is they need the connectivity. The crew members, regardless of their specialized skill set, they want to work for an employer that's treating them well, giving them access to resources that they need. Whether that be training, whether that be healthcare, whether that be entertainment. So I think that's never going to change. I think that the new connectivity gives a lot of opportunity to ship owners, operators to become more efficient, deploy new technology, being able to get a lot of the data that we see. We see a lot of telemetry come back from systems, and it's been eye opening to the ship owner operator. They didn't really know what was going on their ships before. They didn't know what was connected, what was going out to the internet, what was coming in, and the amount of traffic and operational data they were doing. So now having, a tool like CommBox Edge, which sends that data to a centralized cloud portal, they can actually see, where their data is being spent and how to use that efficiently. And I think it's eye opening for the ship owner operator of how much is going on and how they can be more efficient. So yeah, I think there's a good future ahead, and we're getting more connectivity options. So really, we've gone from being a very unique, specialized industry in maritime communications to being more commoditized, if you like, which can be difficult for a company like ours. And we've pivoted and adjusted with other services we offer, such as crew welfare and managed IT and communication management. But it's great for the ship owner operator. It's great for the crew member. The cost of comms is coming down, and I think that's just going to give them more opportunity, potentially shifting budget from comms to more specialized projects like the adoption of AI.
And looking at just touching on that, I mean, looking at the sort of the return on that investment, and the benefits, and as you say, the system can be interrogated. Do you want to just go into a little bit more detail on the sort of information that users of the CommBox Edge system can get from that, from the results? To what extent can it be interrogated? Can you give us some example?
Yeah, so I mean, they can look at trends of their data usage, So if you have a customer that's got multiple WAN connectivity on board, maybe they've got cellular, LEO, or multiple LEO and GEO, they can see, based off their operational route, where they're using which comms, which internet connection is being utilized the most, what kind of traffic is going over that, inbound and outbound. They can see, the usage behavior from business to operations to crew and OT. So it gives them a lot of insight into what's happening. And we've had customers that have deployed systems, run them for a few weeks to really get a picture and an overview of what's happening on board. And then that gives them the information they need to adjust, and maybe they realize, well, okay, we didn't realize how much our crew were using WhatsApp to contact family. So, let's create a crew network which allows free WhatsApp, or something like that. So they can have that welfare perk without much cost to the business and not coming out of a crew member's data allocation. So they can use their data allocation for, more entertainment, more streaming, more social media, but they have that communication perk where they can reach out to their family at any time without it dipping out of their data allocation. So yeah, it gives a lot of insight. We also, have a number of APIs where we bring back telemetry from Starlink, OneWeb, or VSAT systems, and it doesn't even have to be, a KVH supplied system. So a customer may have geo connectivity with one provider, Starlink with another, and have no communications bill coming to KVH at all, but they can still deploy CommBox Edge to manage those communication sources, see the data coming back and the trends and the telematics, and have more insight into what's happening on their vessels. So we've seen that be a great driver of traction to adopt the system as well, that you don't have to have your comms through KVH to operate this system and see what's going on board your vessel.
Excuse me, touching on what you're saying there, you can really see a benefit from the owner, from the manager. You can, as you say, really monitor usage and improve it for the benefit of the seafarers. But the seafarers then seeing that the owner or the employer is there for them, as you rightly say, unlimited communication home, which is really, really important, but then freeing up that space so they can do other things as well. And that must be a real benefit. The other area that we talked about earlier in my introduction was using connectivity for things like CCTV coverage of and shared space monitoring, harassment prevention, which is quite important. Does that, I mean, a little bit of difficult questions, does that sort of maybe put a different light on it where, seafarers could see that they're maybe being sort of monitored too closely in certain situations, but sometimes you have a responsibility to do that as an employer, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's for the greater good, isn't it? It's for the safety of everyone. So, we've all heard of workplace harassment incidents, or, bullying is a hot topic. And, we see this in our everyday life with how bullying's moved from sort of the school playground to online and stuff like that. So it's a true threat, and maybe it looks like Big Brother is watching, but it is for your own safety, right? So, whether that's CCTV in communal areas to make sure that there's no harassment going on, whether that's, man overboard systems to monitor who's walking up gangways and on the outer perimeters of ships and stuff like that. And we see obviously with what's happening in certain regions of the world with anti-piracy systems and stuff like that. So it's technology I think we need. It's bringing shipping up to speed with where land-based enterprise has been for a while, and I think it's just overall a benefit for the crew members and their families to make sure that the crew members stay safe, and that there's these systems in place should anything go wrong, telehealth and stuff like that. This connectivity enables companies that offer telehealth systems to get in quickly and efficiently, and maybe help a crew member that's got a medical emergency or something like that. So I think it's all for the good of the crew member. And like I say, the ship owner as well has these operational efficiencies, can also be an attractive employer, retain their crew members and reduce their training costs and their liability costs as well.
And I think that telehealth element is a really, really important aspect. And I think it sort of harks back to what we talked about earlier, where being on board ship is unique because it's work as well as recreation as well. So, there's a lot of things involved in it. So, you've got to have these sort of checks and balances in place, and you've got to have all of these aspects there. I want to talk just really finally looking at the big issue of cybersecurity. Gone are the days of don't bring a USB stick on board and all the rest of it. It's far more sophisticated than that with phishing. And I think there's something called smishing or something I've come across, which I've never heard of before. Maybe you might like to sort of talk to us a little bit about that. But those sort of
Yeah.
attacks are increasing. Can you put it into context, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, the connected world we live in now, it's a great benefit to all of us, right? We all have an encyclopedia in our hands. We can look at YouTube and find out, how to replace that washer on our bathroom tap or whatever it may be, which is great to have that technology. But with that comes the risk because we're all connected. We've all got internet banking, Netflix, Disney, whatever it may be, Sky Sports, all these accounts and all these digital signatures out there. Gone are the days where you had to worry, as you say, from, well, not gone are the days where you had to worry from a USB. Obviously there's still risk there with external media, but really the technology has moved at such a fast rate that a lot of these risks come from, as you say, phishing and smishing. And smishing is receiving a text message, SMS message, which says, hey, it's the boss of the company, can you click on this link and pay this bill? Or this is the Inland Revenue Service, you've got a tax bill due, please click this link. It's so prevalent now. I mean, just on my personal cell phone, I have a number of anti-spam call software, anti-smishing software and stuff like that. And my provider offers that service too, but they still get through. We still get the occasional spam message through. Here as a corporation as well, we do a lot of internal training with our staff for them to realize how to identify a phishing or a smishing scam. So the risk is huge, really, and every device you have that's connected to the internet poses a risk. So when you think a crew member now probably has an average 2 to 3 devices that can access the internet, perhaps they have a smartphone, a laptop, and a Fitbit, right? Or something like that. And the Fitbit can contact the internet too. So any device you have that can get out, then essentially someone can get in. So you have to have tools like, on CommBox Edge, we have what we call intrusion prevention system, which catches a lot of that stuff, knows the vulnerabilities in software and in networks and can adapt to that. But the crew members sort of need to understand the risks as well. And we see a shift in ship owner operators sort of providing that training now as well, providing that training to ensure that the crew member understands, what may be a illegitimate email or something like that. And with the dawn of cybersecurity regulations, such as the IMO regulations and US Coast Guard regulations, it's going to become more and more critical that ship owner operators train their crew, have the systems in place to do some of that prevention and detection, but they're not infallible, right? So we have what we call 0-day threats, which are something which might come out today, which the likes of Cisco or CloudStrike or Amazon doesn't know about yet. So that's when you see these big corporations fail. And if it can happen to a CloudStrike or it can happen to Starbucks, who got hacked fairly recently, it can happen to anyone, right? So you need to be vigilant and make sure you have the training in place and the systems in place to mitigate that.
No, but I think you're right. I think when you look at, the likes of certain age group of users, who are really very well versed in tech savvy and they're dealing with computers all the time. And then you look at maybe the age demographic profile of seafarers on board ship, their mid 40s up to mid 60s, who maybe aren't as used to seeing the types of scams coming through. And it's so easy to click on that link that says, oh, your wife's been trying to get hold of you. Click here to get a better connection. Bang. Oh my God, my whole phone's been hacked. But that must come down to, as you say, that there's training, what have you. But I think when you've got help and assistance, like something like a CommBox Edge that's helping and assisting in on that, that's going to add that extra layer of security, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a minimum, you want a vessel to have a firewall and a robust sort of security posture and set of rule sets to avoid as much as possible. It's surprising to me now, still, although technology is moving and vessels are getting more sophisticated, there's still a lot out there which are relying on a system, maybe a 10-year-old router that hasn't had a firmware update since it was installed. And there's a bunch of vulnerabilities or open doors and risks there. So it's amazing how much is out there that needs to be brought up to speed. Companies like KVH can help with that. We can do vulnerability assessments and scans of a vessel network to see how secure it is and how robust it is. But as I say, it's good having those tools, those systems in place, but you also do have to have a security first mindset and think about the personnel, because you can have all the systems in place and all the security in the world, but if someone clicks on something, that human error can cause an outage or compromised system.
So just finally, I always like to ask this question. If you and I, Robert, were having this conversation in a year's time, what do you think we're going to be really? As you said, the industry's moving at a massive rate. Demand for connectivity is there, for the facilities, for the apps, everything is there. What do you reckon the industry is going to be embracing in a year's time? How do you think it will sort of move forward?
I'm not sure if it's going to embrace it, but it's going to need to think about it. But I think security is going to be key because, as said before, more systems get on board these vessels. Whether it's AI, whether it's CCTV, whether it's phone systems and entertainment, all this connectivity brings risks. So I think security is going to be paramount. Maybe not in a year's time, maybe in 2 years' time. Have the luxury of also having Amazon Kuiper in the space as well. So connectivity is going to be even more diverse. There's probably going to be 3 to 4 times the amount of data going to vessels than there is today. I mean, we've seen a huge increase in data going to vessels just with Starlink and OneWeb alone. So once you have Amazon there as well, I'm expecting that to double, if not quadruple, in the next couple of years. So, as I say, that comes with more risks. And I think security is going to be paramount. And as a ship gets more connected, more smart systems, more IP enabled devices, then there's risks, right? So, if you look at some of the modern ships coming out where there's less physically connected systems, shall we say, and there's more sort of drive-by-wire kind of technology that comes with its own risks as well. So if someone was to hack into a system that could take control of a vessel's actual movements, it could be pretty disastrous. So I think security is going to be paramount.
Well, Robert, I just want to say thank you very much indeed for your time today. Now, as far as our listeners are concerned, where could they go to find more about CommBox Edge? Where would you suggest they go?
Yeah, they can go to kvh.com to see all of our product offerings, from CommBox Edge to KVH Link and entertainment crew welfare systems. We also have a pretty comprehensive YouTube playlist for CommBox Edge, which can be found on KVH's YouTube page. But yeah, definitely kvh.com is the first place to go. We have a lot of information about our products, services, and the company as a whole. And no matter where customers are, we're headquartered here in Rhode Island in the USA, but we have offices globally and that global reach. So no matter where a customer is, if they go to kvh.com, they'll be able to find their local representative and partners.
Brilliant. Well, Robert, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Fascinating stuff. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with you over the next few months or so. But it's exciting time. But thank you very much indeed for coming on our SMI podcast today.
Appreciate it, Sean. Thanks very much. Appreciate you having me.